Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance and welcome to my first ever Stygian Onslaught guide. This is a little bit delayed mainly because I've done so much research and testing, so now I can give you a fully comprehensive list of all the options for beating this. Also, as this endgame is new, I'll first quickly summarize the game mode for those unfamiliar, and then we'll dive into the enemies. This is a boss rush game mode much like the ones we've got in the past. You require 3 teams, though the characters only need to be unique at the later difficulties. Oh, and you start with no energy. There's 6 difficulties in total, and the first 3 are pretty simple. You start with difficulties normal, advancing, and hard, and go levels 40, 70, 90 respectively. And the third, hard, is very much similar to facing an overworld boss. The individual boss combats are called battlefields, and clearing all 3 battlefields of a difficulty within the allocated time rewards you with the difficulty rewards. These are primo gems for the first 3 difficulties. You can also co-op and match for these difficulties, and by clearing hard you get all the rewards of the prior difficulties. So this should be completable for every player, as you can even co-op these to get carried. Before attempting difficulty 3, you have to select an artifact domain, and after clearing any boss at difficulty 3 or higher, you can then choose to spend resin to claim the same rewards as you would for clearing a domain. For the first 10 days after the endgame starts, while the ley lines are in, quote, outbreak mode, you will get a free extra artifact for every 120 resin you spend. You can spend as much resin as you like here during this period, and keep clearing bosses over and over. After spending 1200 resin, you can claim an artifact reroller, and you can keep claiming the extra artifacts even after claiming this reward. Difficulty 4, on the other hand, has some of these rules, but not all of them. Challenge-wise, it's somewhere between floor 11 and floor 12 of the Abyss. You can't match anymore, but you can complete this in co-op by inviting people. And I should mention here that co-op for this game mode is easier than normal. In the overworld for co-op, enemies' HP gets scaled depending on the number of players, and for 4 players that's 2.5 times their initial HP. But for this game mode specifically, there's a cap of 1.5 times the enemy's health, which means co-oping these is easier than ever. If you do clear this in co-op though, remember you need to clear all 3 battlefields in one go. You can't mix and match together co-op and solo clears. If you are struggling with difficulty 4 and you're looking for people to help you in co-op, or just for team advice, you're more than welcome to ask in my Discord or even stop by my Twitch when I'm helping people clear. I promise this is the only self-promo I'll do this video. Difficulty 4 also restricts you from using repeating characters. This means for every battlefield your characters need to be unique, and the time limit also narrows from 10 minutes down to 2 minutes. Though the rewards from difficulty 4 are no longer primo gems, so if you can't complete this or don't want to, you're not missing out on much. You just get one of the artifact reroller materials. Difficulty 5 will be the biggest challenge for most players. It has all of the same rules as difficulty 4, but you can now no longer get the rewards for completing it in co-op. It introduces brand new enemy mechanics which add big restrictions to your team building criteria, and the HP is much higher, so this is more like if they added an Abyss floor 13. Lastly, only after completing difficulty 5 can you see difficulty 6. If you manage to complete difficulty 6, you earn a temporary weapons skin. This difficulty is really only designed for whales who pull meta characters. To test them, I pull every character at C0 and get their signature. But even I was only just able to complete this difficulty, and I was only within 2 seconds of the total time limit allowed. The characters that are most commonly used within the server to clear difficulty 6 will also receive a buff to them for any of the other lower difficulties. I think 16 characters in total receive this buff, which is much like the opening characters in Imagium Theatre. This gives them 20% attack, HP, and defense. It's not a lot, but it's still something. But I'm not going to focus on that upper difficulty. In fact, this guide is mainly going to be focused on helping clear difficulty 5, as that's a difficulty where it introduces new mechanics and is more challenging than people are probably used to. But as usual, as I'm going over the enemies in a lot of detail, this will also apply to the other difficulties. So talking about the enemies, let's dive right in, and dive is appropriate because we've got the Hydro Tulpa first of all. Hopefully you've faced the Hydro Tulpa before in Abyss, and they have a constant Hydro aura and are completely immune to Hydro damage. Of course, because they're a big blob of Hydro, they also do Hydro attack. And if you find that you're getting one-shot a lot by this boss, it's probably because you're standing in a Bennett burst. Bennett's burst applies pyro to you, which means when you get hit by these hydro attacks, the enemy is vaporizing and amplifying the damage they're doing to you. The core thing you'll have to play around to make the most of this boss is its hydro aura. Because it has constant hydro on it, you're going to get a number of free reactions on it, whether that's a pyro carry getting a lot of vaporizers, or a dendro character using all the hydro to make more blooms. I did a much deeper analysis on this hydro aura in my 5.5 Abyss guide, so if you want information on that, you can go check that out. So alongside with the benefits of free reactions, there's also some negatives to this you need to think about when you're building your characters. A character that's probably going to be pretty popular for this battlefield is Citlali, but Citlali can't make use of the usual scroll set you'd run on her in the same way as usual. This is because of the Tulpa's constant hydro, meaning the only reaction Citlali is triggering is freeze, and so the scroll set is only buffing up cryo and hydro, which is not helpful for your pyro carries. Therefore, you'd rather run her on something like Tenacity of the Millilith. There's lots of different niche cases related to this aura, from not being able to swirl pyro on an Animo support, to Sucrose being able to swirl the fire that Guoba spits out, or Ian-san using Bennett's C6 infusion to do a pyro attack to buff pyro for the scroll set. I'm not going to go really deep into detail here, but I wanted to give some more complex examples so you have an idea that this is something worth thinking about. And if you do have more questions or would like a more extended section on this, say it in the comments and I'll either try to reply to the question or know about that for next time. Okay, let's finally get onto the mechanics. About 12 seconds into the combat, the Tulpa will summon half Tulpas. They will only summon one of these in the regular version and two of them in difficulty 5 or higher. Usually these would have a ward on them of a single unit, and when you broke that ward they would be instantly defeated. But in the enhanced version of the mechanic, that ward now consists of 12 units of hydro, so it's much harder to defeat. You'll either have to have a lot of application, or they've added a mechanic where if you apply any amount of cryo to it, it's instantly defeated. This makes abilities that can hit enemies passively from off-field like Ganyu's burst or Citlali's skill very valuable. Usually the Tulpa will do a chain of attacks, then after that initial chain of attacks it will start trying to absorb the surrounding Tulpas. If there's no half Tulpas, it will just start attacking instead. But if it's trying to absorb them, you have a brief period to run around and dispose of the half Tulpas. You absolutely don't want to let it absorb a half Tulpa, because if you do, its resistances get increased. In the regular version they get increased to 45, but in the enhanced version not only do they get increased to 200, but the Tulpa will also heal 12.5% of its HP. In the enhanced version, after about 40 seconds, whenever it finishes the animation of the attack it's doing, it will start a special mechanic. This mechanic is both good and bad. First of all, the Tulpa will instantly summon 2 half Tulpas, but that's fairly inconsequential. The bigger problem is that it also summons a white ward on itself worth 9% of its max HP. You might have seen white wards like this before on the Y-Ops, and this behaves the exact same way, in that you can trigger amplifying reactions on it like Vaporize, but you're not going to get any of the bonus damage that a Vaporize would normally give you, which is already going to make this challenge a lot harder. You'll have about 12 seconds in total to break this ward, though they do try to make it a little easier for you. About a second before the ward is spawned, your screen will flash gold, and at this point all of your skill cooldowns and burst cooldowns and energy will be reset, so you can instantly cast any abilities and bursts you need to. If your rotations line up correctly, you can even get multiple bursts off to benefit you. For example, you could get 2 Zhangling bursts spinning around you at the same time, or if you timed it perfectly, you could get a mavuika burst to land, do damage to the ward as your burst gets reset and refills so you can instantly burst again. Though as the timing of this mechanic is a little bit unpredictable, this isn't convenient to try and repeat. If you fail the mechanic and don't break the ward in time, whichever is your active character after the mechanic, even if you iframe it or burst, they will get one shot, essentially condemning your run to failure. If you do successfully break the ward, the Tulpa will take some damage based upon the amount of damage that you did to the ward. If the half Tulpas are still present after this, it will probably try to do another mechanic where it tries to reabsorb the Tulpas, and then it's pretty much clear sailing until the end of the fight. I did notice that some of the attacks that the Tulpa did in the enhanced version were just more dangerous. When it slams the hammer down on the third attack, there's rings of Hydra around the floor as a telegraph that you need to dodge, but beyond that there's not too many more specific mechanics to this fight. Team suggestions are going to be a little harder in this section because having a constellation or a signature weapon on some characters can make quite a big difference to whether they're able to clear or not. But I can still summarize the kind of team archetypes that would be able to clear this, which are really defined for the Tulpa by 2 factors. One, you need to make sure you have the capacity to defeat the half Tulpas. You need some kind of reliable cryo application for that, strong dendro application in the form of something like Nahida, or quick and consistent application combinations of elements that can definitely deal with the Tulpas, so lots of electro and pyro. The other condition is that you need to make constant use of this Hydra aura that Tulpa has, so that leaves kind of two team archetype. You can use a pyro carry, and a lot of pyro carries can work well here, especially the newer units. Of course, mavuika is going to be great at this. Mavuika is in fact a little bit stifled against this boss because you can't apply cryo to it, so she can't get melts to amplify her damage as much as she'd normally be able to. But other pyro carries like Lini or Arakino are still pretty viable. You can then pair them with a cryo character, and Sidlali is going to be really good as an option for this. He's able to very easily deal with those half Tulpas and reduce its resistance to all pyro damage, because she only needs to trigger a melt or a freeze to reduce the enemy's resistance to pyro and cryo. Xiangling can also be quite useful here because her burst is able to hit the Tulpa multiple times as it spins through it. You can run that pyro carry in a vape team. You can add Nahida in there to make it a vape team with some extra Burgeons if you need Nahida to deal with the half Tulpas, or just bring excessive amounts of both electro and pyro to deal with those half Tulpas. So an overload team relying heavily on Chevrust to tie that team together. The other avenue you could go down, which doesn't rely on pyro damage so much, is using a Hyper Bloom team. Because the enemy has a constant Hydra aura, that means you don't need to bring a Hydro character to get blooms, so you can bring more Dendro characters to get more blooms. And as you only need one Electro character to trigger those blooms, you could run something like Alhaitham, Nahida, Baiju. You're going to be triggering a hell of a lot more blooms, and hopefully that's enough to get past it. Or at least they're the best examples of teams I've seen done at low cost. Of course, you can do whatever team you want to if you have more investment, and if there's other interesting clears and methods to defeating these bosses which you used, which I haven't mentioned, please put them in the comments. Then not only do I know about them, but everybody else can become aware of them. And maybe there's someone out there that didn't know they could clear in this way. I'm not going to really give higher difficulty recommendations because that just becomes more restrictive. You just need the better characters like mavuika and more investment like cons and signatures. And for the lower difficulties of this, there's just less limits. You simply don't need to worry about the half Tulpas anywhere near as much. But everything else pretty much still applies. It's just a bigger variety of teams because it's less difficult, so the damage requirements aren't as high. And that will apply to all of the team suggestions I'll do throughout. Let's move on to the second boss now. Let's take a look at the Lava Dragon statue. The Lava Dragon statue proved a difficult enemy for a lot of people in Abyss recently, and it's still just as problematic now. The Lava Dragon essentially has three forms, and the first form has 150 resistance. This is raised to 200 in the enhanced version, so you're going to do even less damage to it. In the first two forms, it has this Fury bar over its head. This bar gets increased anytime you apply Pyro or hit with Pyro. For example, a Bennett skill, which is 2 applications, will do double the amount of charging to it. And you need to fill up this bar to full to get it to change form. The biggest difference for the enhanced version is that most of these values that you'd use to charge it up before are now about halved what they were, which means it's going to take twice the effort to charge this up. This makes you a lot more reliant on Pyro and burning application. Before, you could be a bit lackadaisical with the kind of characters you were bringing to charge this up. Now there's a lot stricter requirements. In the second form, all of its resistances, apart from the Pyro resistance, drop down to 45%. The Pyro resistance will stay at whichever version's resistance it was at before, so 150 or 200. In the second form, this bar starts off at 20%. In the second form, it has a constant Pyro aura. And while it's in the second form, any hits at all of Hydro or Cryo reduce this meter by 20%. When the meter reaches 0, it will revert forms, meaning you'll have to charge it up to get it to change form all over again. And the difference for the enhanced version here is that, again, it's much slower to charge up this bar. Once this meter reaches 50% in the second form, it will take 15% true damage, and this is based on its current HP, which means the less damage it's taken, the more damage it will take, but this is also capped in the harder difficulties to 1.5 million. Same current HP true damage will occur once it reaches 100% in this second form bar. You can't go back and forth over 50% to get it to re-trigger this. It will take the damage at those thresholds once per form. After it reaches 100%, it will transform into its last form, which is this overburn form, and here all of its resistances drop down to 10%. You'll have about 17 seconds while it's paralyzed to do as much damage as you can do. After that, it reverts back to the starting form and cycles round again. So we can now look at some teams for this. This enemy probably has the most varied teams, as there's a couple of ways to deal with it. Commonality being that no matter what you do, you need really good pyro application. Then you can mix that with electro characters and get an overload team. Usually here you're taking Chevros as your overload enabler, an electro damage dealer so you don't have to deal with the really high resistances for as long, and then someone like Zhang Ling for a lot of pyro application. If you're playing an electro character that likes triggering lots of reactions or doesn't mind there being danger in the team, you can also play an overburn team, or burning load or something. This works very well for characters like Sethos, who naturally like to build lots of elemental mastery. Those overload teams I was talking about are definitely slower to charge up the meter. On the other hand, the rest of the teams that I've seen done make use of burning a lot to charge up that bar. You could take a burning carry themselves that's naturally synergistic like Ganesh. He's doing a damage type that's not pyro, so he gets the low resistances. He constantly wants lots of danger and pyro, so you're filling up that bar very fast. I have seen some odd mixes of teams like Air Fryer, so you have lots of Animo units, you'll have Nahida in there, and you'll have a pyro unit. Here, because you're constantly swirling and proccing burning, you're progressing those bars really quickly, so you're getting multiple downs. By getting through these stages faster, you're making it take more true damage, so you need to do less damage yourself. For example, you could run a pyro carry as long as you had a lot of pyro application on the team. Someone like Klee has an incredible amount of pyro application if you use them as a support or an on-fielder. The last character that I think works really well for this is Mualani. Mualani constantly wants the enemy to have a pyro aura, and she works really well with Nahida, so you can get burning on the enemy very easily. In fact, when I was researching Mualani and looking into how she played against this boss, there were some interesting things I noticed players doing, working around the fact that she decreases the bar in the second form. The first being, in the brief period while it's transforming forms, it has no meter, but it will still have lowered resistances before it's fully transformed. In this period, you can get an attack with the lower resistances without it decreasing the meter. The other fact is that unlike other teams that really want to progress that meter as fast as possible and take more true damage, Mualani, your pyro application wasn't fast enough so that you could get 3 phases out of it. You ended up with 2 and a bit phases. So instead of trying to burn through the bars as fast as possible, and it had lower health, so it had already taken the maximum amount of true damage, and during the second phase, you could do some attacks on Mualani to extend that second phase to be longer, decreasing the bar, because it still has much lower resistances in that form. And so even though you only got it knocked down twice, still making it spend more time when it has lower resistances. This is really going quite in depth on this team, and if this is a bit much for you, let me know. Okay, and lastly, let's take a look at the Cryo Automaton. This is certainly the most restrictive of the enemies. The Cryo Automaton very soon into combat enters the sweep mode, and here it gains really high resistances. 210% in the regular version, 270% in the enhanced version. And you'll see the flow momentum bar next to its name appear with 32 points. You really want to get this meter down below 10 points, and the way you do that is by hitting it with cryo. It doesn't matter about the application like the lava dragon, just a cryo hit, whether that's a cryo swirl or an attack, will decrease this bar. Every hit decreases it by 4 points. When it goes below 10 points, its resistances drop massively and it stops doing its damaging beams that spin around it. The regular version, this meter increases by about 5 points every second, and so you need just over 1 hit every second to be able to get it to decrease. Of course, at the start of combat, you'd like a chunk of hits to make it decrease pretty rapidly. In the enhanced version though, this is made even harder. Instead of 5 points a second, it's about 6.7 points a second. So now it's more like you need hits every half a second to make it go down. It means you're massively reliable on having a high amount of cryo hits. The enhanced version, when it goes below 10 points for the first time, it gives you a bunch of energy particles. I think it's 36 energy. It should help with a lot of your character's bursts you're trying to charge up. Resistances are also slightly different when it's below 10 points. In the regular version, it's minus 40 to cryo and 0 to the rest, meaning you're not punished a lot if you want to play a different carry. Maybe you want to play Nervalette. In the enhanced version, though, the resistances drop to minus 30 for cryo and to 30 for the rest, so that resistance is still pretty high. The other option you have in the regular version is to use its Night Soul mode. The character enters the Night Soul mode, it generates 30 points on these glowing runes around the edge. Every character that an on-field or off-field character spends in the Night Soul Blessing state also increases this meter by another 10 points. Getting this meter to 180 causes it to change forms. In the regular version, this is another way to deal with this mechanic, as it drops its resistances down to 45%, which is pretty low, and the attacks aren't too dangerous. On the other hand, in the enhanced version, it's pretty obvious that they don't want you to try and use this form. The resistances are dropped down to just 110%, which is still huge, and at the same time, the frequency of the attacks that it does are increased versus the regular version, and they hit pretty hard, meaning if you try to use a melee character that needs to not move around too much, you're heavily punished. Essentially, they don't want you using mavuika on this boss. In the regular version, this mechanic doesn't start right away. At difficulty 4, it does, but it only lasts about 30 to 40 seconds. Whereas at difficulty 5 or higher, this mechanic lasts up to a minute, meaning you're going to be in this state for the majority of the combat, before returning to its natural state where it has standard resistances, which is just 10 to everything. It'll do some attacks and then start this mechanic all over again. As far as teams go for this boss, the options are really limited from my testing and seeing what clears people have been able to do. The obvious team which is going to work really well is using Skirk, Escoffier and Farina. Either you put Shenhe in there instead of Yelan for even more cryo application. But that's the ideal team, and how many people actually own that and went for all those characters. If you don't have Farina, I have seen people get away with just using Escoffier and using a combination of hydro characters and cryo carries. I've also seen clears where people didn't have Escoffier, but they did have Skirk and they were able to clear with other supports. I did see a clear where they were using a combination of really well built with some 5-star weapons, admittedly not signature, just mono cryo characters, using Ayaka, Ganyu, Shenhe and Kazuha. But these were incredibly well built characters. As with most teams in this game mode, the more you deviate from what they intend you to play, the more vertical investment you're going to have on those characters to compensate. The one other alternative I've seen done, which wasn't specifically cryo damage, was with, I think it was C1 Arlecchino, using many cryo characters with her to get that meter down as consistently as possible. But again, that's vertical investment. If you are looking for some suggestions of characters to add into those cryo teams, Kaya has a lot of hits on his burst. Diona, using sacrificial fragments, can do a lot of hits with her skill. Ganyu does a lot of hits with her burst from off-field. Ayaka's burst itself has 20 unique hits. As when you start with no energy, getting that meter down very quickly is really important. Something that I should probably also mention in this guide, maybe I should have said it at the start, that's also pretty important to all team orientations, is to really start thinking about your artifacts a little more and the hyper optimizations you can do with them. For example, in a Skirk team, most of you will be running Farina on Golden Troop. A lot of you might be running Yelan on Emblem. Say Farina's the only Hydro character, she needs a lot of energy in the first place. You give her a Favonius sword, that's decreasing her damage. She's got no other Hydro character for HP Resonance, so her damage goes down again. There she's really fulfilling the role of a support, and so the damage that she does isn't very important. You can take her off Golden Troop and give her something that supports the team, like Tenacity of the Millith instead. When I did my clear on the die difficulty, because I know Skirk was doing a lot of the damage in the team, I ended up putting Escoffier on Scroll. Even though she's not a Natlan character, the 12% damage that Escoffier was giving the whole team was better, if marginally, than the damage that she'd do by running Golden Troop. So if you really want to get the most out of your teams in these game modes, you might have to start thinking a bit more creatively about your builds. Either way, I think that should be everything for all the bosses. The original version was 40 minutes long, but I wanted to cut down on a lot of the unnecessary details about enemies, and lots that I'd already said in my Abyss guides. So if you have any thoughts, questions, corrections, anything else people might want to know, or anything I can improve about the video that would be a good suggestion, please put them down in the comments. I always appreciate those, even if it's just, yeah, I like the video, good job. As I normally also say, if you enjoyed the video, you could leave a like, or if you want to make sure you catch these guides next time, subscription's always appreciated. Or maybe you thought someone else you know could also find this guide useful and you'd like to share it with them, and that's always helpful for my channel, so thank you if you do that. As always, thank you for all the support in these things, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye!